Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the other CEDH, where the C stands for casual. We're by no means competitive. No, on this channel we're all about fun and casual kitchen table Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for joining us. Quick disclaimer, this episode may run a tad longer than the others. There is a bit of backstory and bullshit here. I wasn't even trying for alliteration on that one, it was just a happy accident. Yep, here we go. So, this is a deck that I've been using for a while now, and you guys, I absolutely love it. It very routinely does a thing, and that thing, pardon my French, is fucking awesome. It also occurred to me that while looking through my decks on Tapped Out and seeing which one I wanted to make into an episode, I realized that I do not have a list for this guy. So we're going to build one right here and right now, and you guys can maybe get an esoteric glimpse into my deck building process. I don't know that esoteric was the right word, but in any case, here we go. So, backstory time. This deck started its life as an OG Joyra deck with Joyra of the Gitu. She's 1 blue-red for a legendary creature human wizard. She has pay 2, exile a non-land card from your hand, put 4 time counters on the exiled card. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. Suspend being at the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter from that card. When the last is removed, cast it without paying its mana cost. If it's a creature, it has haste. Basically, she gives all your shit suspend 4 for only 2 mana, so you pay 2, exile some big stupid thing like a Consecrated Sphinx or Jenga Taxis, and theoretically you get it 4 turns later. This deck did run all the effects that take away those counters, things like Joyra's Time Bug, Time Bender, and Paradox Haze to kind of cheat your way around those counters. Here's the thing, big problem with Joyra, she is kill on sight for almost everyone. Most of us have played against that OG Joyra deck that blasted all their lands on turn 6 and made them essentially just sit there not doing anything. So any table with any brains at all will not let this bitch live. You can naturally build her with a lot of protection, things like Alexi's Cloak, Swiftfoot Boots, and Nurok Stealth Suit. But in order to make this build really shine, I was going to have to run mass land destruction to really police the table in order to kind of get my win cons online, and I did not want to be that guy. However, I had the shell of something really great here, and in my own mind I knew if I could add green to this to ramp into these big monsters, this could be a really viable build. So after some astute tinkering and tweaking, I have come up with a deck that in a lot of casual metas could really wreak a lot of havoc. So who is at the helm of this terrifying teamer titan? Sorry. Well, today we're going to look at the Draconic Don Juan, who is a dastardly daredevil that will dominate the day with a despicable amount of damage. It's been a long time, everyone, so I'm excited for this one. Today we're bringing you a long overdue EDH deck tech built around Intet the Dreamer. Intet the Dreamer is 3 blue, red, green, and is a 6/6 legendary creature dragon. He has flying, that's it, nothing else. Kidding. He also says whenever Intet the Dreamer deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2 and a blue if you do exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may play that card without paying its mana cost for as long as Intet remains on the battlefield. Honestly, guys, the way that I have built this deck, the ability on Intet, if you can get him to connect, is just pure gravy. In order for the deck to function, you don't even really need Intet on the battlefield, but if you can get him out there and get that attack trigger to hit, he becomes even better. We do have some stuff to manipulate the top of our library here. We will go over that here in a bit. But as always, we're going to look at 4 main categories: mana ramp, card draw, insert the thing that this deck wants to do here, which in this case is a bunch of big, nasty, mean, pissed off flying monsters. And more importantly, how are we going to win this game? Without further ado, let's dive right in. Also, excuse me while I go write this deck list. Okay, and a scant 20 minutes later, we went from a blank page to a list on Tapped Out. It's a little scary how efficient that was. Anyway, mana ramp is up first. I'm just going to breeze through this one. This is a lot of your classic sorcery-based green ramp, and there is a lot of it here because big mana is the name of the game. So without further ado, here we go. Farseek will let you get anything but a forest in a play tapped, and Rampant Growth will let you get any basic, including a forest, in a play tapped. Kodama's Reach lets you get 1 land on the battlefield tapped and the other one in your hand, which you can play after you've cast a spell if you haven't hit your land for turn. And Hero will let you sack a land and bring 2 lands on the battlefield untapped. Colony Heart Expedition is a great enchantment for 2 mana, getting you 2 lands on the battlefield tapped once you've hit that landfall trigger 3 times, which in this deck is pretty easy to do. Cultivate is an exact copy of Kodama's Reach, getting you a land in a play tapped, 1 into your hand. Search for Tomorrow can be suspended for a single green mana, which is a great turn 1 play. And Steve or Sakura Tribe Elder lets you sacrifice it to getting land into play tapped. Frontier Siege will let you choose the cons mode, which will net you green in your mana pool in each of your main phases. Grow from the Ashes can be kicked to get 2 lands into play untapped, and Dawn Trigger Elk will let you sacrifice it for a green to get a land into play tapped. You know what we're going to do now? We're going to draw some cards, and anyone that's ever played Magic with me who's listening to this right now is saying, Eric, draw cards? Yeah, actually that sounds a lot like him. Anyway, Myojin of Seeing Winds is really great here, coming in with a divinity counter if you cast it from your hand. Important to note that it does not come in with that counter if you are cheating this in off Intet's attack trigger. Please be aware of that. But once he has that divinity counter, you can remove it to draw a card for each permanent you control. Now mind you, this guy costs 10, so you need 10 lands to cast this guy. Plus he counts himself in that, so at a baseline you're drawing 11 cards, which is nuts. I love it. Stroke of Genius and Pull from Tomorrow are here as well. Great draw spells for a big mana build. These can draw you a gross amount of cards. And Rush of Knowledge will let us draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents we control, which in this deck is a rather large number. We're running a ton of monsters with a high CMC, so this is great here. And Ugin's Insight lets you scry X, where X is the highest converted mana cost among permanents we control, and then lets us draw 3 cards. This guy will let us dig really, really deep, fantastic card here as well. Elemental Bond is in here as well, drawing us a card when a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield. That will hopefully be happening very frequently. And finally, Temur Ascendancy is great here, giving all your creatures haste and drawing you a card whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield. I really, really like it. So we've ramped a ton of mana, drawn a butt ton of cards. What are we going to do with all those cards? Well, we're going to cast those cards. And what are we casting? Big, angry dragons. This deck was actually originally built to combat another dragon deck at our table, my buddy Dan and his Dragon Precon, which, let me say, that bad boy is mean and nasty. If any of you out there have one of those Precons, you should relish the fact that you have a copy because that deck is effective. Anyway, we want to cast big, mean dragons. I'm not going to go over every single dragon in here. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights. Ryusei the Falling Star is in here, nice 5/5 flyer, and when he dies, he deals 5 damage to each creature without flying. Ouch. And Draku Southmaw of Flames is here as well, dealing a ton of damage on attack, which is really, really sweet since we want to turn these beefy boys sideways. Atarka World Render is pretty much game over if you can manage to get one to stick. This thing is nuts. And Atali is in here as well. Any of you guys that listen to my channel will know that I'm just a big fan of this card. I had to put it in here. We threw an It the Betrays in here because, why not? Oh, and I could possibly also cheat it out for 3 mana. I mean, sure, that's cool. And Wind Raider Sphinx is really cool here as well. It just says whenever a creature with flying attacks, draw a card. Nice bit of utility here, especially seeing as how this deck was meant to combat flyers. And please make a note that this does not say whenever a creature you control with flying attacks, meaning you get this trigger off all your opponent's flying creatures as well. I really, really like it. Molten Primordial is cool in here as well, letting you gain control of 1 creature from each of your opponents. That's right, I'm not above stealing your stuff. And Chroma Angel of Fury is a hard hitter that can be morphed for a bit of a discount, which is really cool. That protection from white and blue is really, really nice as well. Tyrant's Familiar is really brutal here, 5/5 flyer with haste, and if you have Intet out, he's a 7/7 that deals 7 damage to one of your opponent's creatures when it attacks. Nice little bit of removal that cross-synergizes with what we're doing here. That's what I like to call good deck building. And Imperial Hellkite will let you morph it, and when you do, you get to tutor any dragon directly to your hand. Lots of nice, juicy targets for this one. Horde Smelter Dragon also functions as a nice bit of utility artifact removal and has a bit of pump. I like it. And Solanu Phyrexia can get you out of a bind in a hurry. You'll almost always be able to hold open enough mana to activate this thing in case of a board wipe, so that is really, really handy. Alright, so we've ramped, we've drawn cards, we've played out giant flying monsters, but on to the important part, which is how are we going to win this game? I talked about Atarka World Render earlier. This thing is just straight death incarnate, giving dragons you control double strike upon attack. That is almost always lethal on someone. And Udvara Hellkite should not exist in a world where you can cast it for 8 mana, much less cheat it out for 3. If you can get this thing to stick, it is surely going to mean lights out. We're also running Crucible of Fire, giving all your dragons +3/+3, which is super, super gross. And because of course we are, we're also running Dragon Tempest. I don't know how many times I've died to this card. It's an enchantment for 1 in a red, which gives your flying creatures haste when they ETB, and it also deals damage equal to the number of dragons you control to target creature or player whenever a dragon enters the battlefield. I love killing with this card. I hate losing to it. Guys, put this in your dragon decks. And while we're on the topic of win conditions, let's take a look at a card called Omniscience. Omniscience is an enchantment for 7 blue, yep, 10 mana, wait for it. It says you may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. Yep, just straight drop shit out of your hand for free. Guys, in the time that I've been playing this card, there was only one time where I resolved it and didn't just immediately win the game. Best part is you can cheat this in with Intet for only 3 mana, guys. Play Omniscience more, I beg you. It is worth every single penny and an insane inclusion in this deck. Anyway, to sum up real quick, play a lot of big flying monsters and start smashing face. This deck isn't anything fancy, but if you're a green and red player and just like to turn your board sideways and smash a lot of face, this deck will fit the bill rather nicely. On the note of being able to use Intet's combat damage trigger, we are running some nice cheap utility cards that can either help smooth out your draws in the early game or let you use them once Intet is on the battlefield in order to ensure that you hit exactly what you want. Brainstorm will let you draw 3, then put any 2 from your hand back on top of your library. And remember, it doesn't have to be one of the ones that you drew, so that is super great. Important will let you look at the top 3 cards of your library and then put them back in any order, or shuffle your library if you don't like what you see, and will also draw you an extra card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Very, very handy. Telling Time will let you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one in your hand, one on top of your library, and the other on the bottom. And Dream Cache will let you draw 3 cards and put 2 either on top of your library or on bottom, which is just a really good bit of card selection. Removal, just really quick here, you want to be able to deal with your opponent's things, so we're running Bluster Squall. It can tap down an attacker if you don't want to take that big bit of damage, or it can really, you can overload it and really bring the shields down on everyone and swing in for lethal, which is really, really great. And Ether Gale will bounce a good bit of someone's board, so you can swing in for lethal as well. Cancel and Dissolve are great counter spells here. Dissolve lets you scry 1, which is a good bit of utility in this deck. Slin Vote of the Rising Deep is in here, which can be kicked to return pretty much everything back to its owner's hand. It is 10 mana to get the board wipe effect, but again, it should be no problem here. And Displacement Wave can be cast for a ton, pretty much wiping the board clean, which can be a huge blowout for your opponents. Alright, that pretty much does it for the bulk of the deck, but now let's take a look at the mana base. Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse will let you sack them to get a basic and play tapped. Rugged Highlands and Timber Gorge each come into play tapped and tap for red or green. Kazandu Refuge comes into play tapped and also taps for red or green, while Swiftwater Cliffs comes into play tapped and taps for red or blue. Highland Lake and Izzet Guildgate also both come into play tapped and also tap for red or blue. We can pay 1 and sack John Panorama to get a forest or mountain into play tapped, and we can pay 1 and sack Grixis Panorama to get an island or a mountain into play tapped. We can pay 2 and sack Warp Landscape to get any basic land into play tapped, and finally we're running 25 basic lands, 11 will be mountains, 8 will be forests, and 6 will be islands. Alright, now let's talk turkey. How much is this deck going to set you back? This one got a little expensive, but we still clocked in at $100. Don't ask, just keep an eye on this channel as to why that is going to be important. You will find out very, very soon. Anyway, as always, we're going by Card Kingdom lowest near mint price as of the time of this recording. It's $89.39. Little pricey, but still not terrible. And holy shit, It That Betrays is up to $14 now. I'm really glad I decided not to sell my copy when I was thinking of doing such a thing. Cut that first if you want to save a little bit of money. Myojin of Seeing Winds is almost $5. It's great. Cut it if you need to save some cash. I also just realized Omniscience is almost $13. I think I paid $6 for it when I bought it. Honestly, if you just cut Omniscience and It That Betrays, the budget will really go down on this one for you. And I'm sure that you guys can find some really great alternatives if you're looking to save some cash. And now let's move on to our alternate build pass and upgrades. One of the ways that you could spin this commander would be to lean into a sort of big dumb instant and sorcery sub-theme. We're already running a little bit of this sub-theme in the deck with things like Volcanic Vision and Overflowing Insight. Volcanic Vision returns an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand and deals damage to your opponent's creatures equal to the return card's CMC, which is really, really awesome. And Overflowing Insight is a lot of mana, but it just straight draws you a new hand of 7. Feel free to run those spells, but you could also include your extra turn spells like Beacon of Tomorrows, Time Stretch, and Time Warp. These are obviously not a good way to go if you're trying to stick to a budget. Those cards can be rather expensive, but that is one of the ways that you could go. Cologne Legion would be awesome here as well, giving you a token copy of each creature one of your opponent's controls. Really, really cool. And feel free to run Expropriate if you want to be, you know, that guy. I've also wanted to cast an Insurrection, so feel free to put that in here if you're going the instant and sorcery theme. And you can put a Scrambleverse in here if you want the entire table to hate your guts. It's cool. I'll pause so you guys can read this thing. Yeah, I don't get it either. Probably shouldn't put this in your deck, but on the same token, I'm not telling you how to live your life. Another fun way to build this would be to lean into your extra combats and damage doublers. Hellkite Charger would be a natural include here, giving you an extra combat for 7 mana when it attacks. And Relentless Assault is a sorcery that will give you an extra combat as well. This is also nice if you have a lot of mana because it lets you get a second trigger off Intet, which is very, very handy indeed. Scourge of the Throne is a bit pricey, but would be a natural fit here as well. And World at War is a great include here as well, giving you an extra combat step for 2 turns in a row. This card is sure to net you the W if you can get it to stick. Finally, as far as your damage doublers, things like Dictate of the Twin Gods and Furnace of Wrath. I've mentioned these 100 times before. You guys know that I really like these, so you could feel free to put these in this build as well. Finally, you could do something cool like doing Eldrazi Tribal with this commander as well. We're already running an It That Betrays, and we just happen to have a spare one. But things like Artisan of Kozilek would be a great budget include here. Pathrazer of Ulamog would be nice to hit off the Intet trigger. Really, really good in this deck. Ulamog's Crusher is just devastating. I hate sitting down across from one of these things. Dan, you know what I'm talking about. And Breaker of Armies is another great budget option here as well, really letting you get a big attack through, which is really, really nice. Again, these are a few budget ideas, but if you have the money to throw around and get one of the OG Eldrazi Titans like an Ulamog or a Kozilek, even the Legal Emrakul would be a powerhouse in this deck, especially since you technically get the cast trigger when you cheat it in with Intet Oh my god, I hope to do that one of these days. Alright, I think that's going to just about wrap it up for this Commander deck tech on Intet the Dreamer. Sorry guys, I know this took a little longer than usual, but I really love this deck. It very routinely does a thing, ramps into big huge monsters that do a ton of damage, and in the end, it's a super fun build that I'm very proud of. I'm a big fan of Commander decks that can function well without their Commander, and this is one of those builds. Feel free to build it as is, or really just kind of tweak it and make it your own. Also, feel free to check out the list and the link below, fresh off the presses. And I have to say that doing a deck tech this way in concert with writing the episode was a ton of fun, and I hope to do it again in the future. And so that brings us to the end of the show rigmarole. Please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe to our channel. As always, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Twitter. Please feel free to reach out to us on social media and say hello. Also, big thanks to Dan Jones, proofreader, fact checker, and a guy who also happens to know 413 ways to use a crescent wrench. And also a big thanks to Darbyskull Studio and his proprietor, Jacob Darby, audio guru, video savant, and little known fact, the only man to ever defeat the original Dark Souls video game 3 times in a row, using nothing but a water bottle, toothpick, and a copy of the original soundtrack to the movie Encino Man. Once again, my name is Eric, this is the other CEDH, and we will see you guys next time.